Hi everyone, happy Sunday. It's Alysia Silberg here, and I'm really excited to be joined by Christian Meyers, my partner at Street Global Venture Capital, for the special edition of our weekly Investor Sundays Fireside Chat. Welcome to our look at the changing nature of startup, angel, venture capital, and private investing in innovation. For those of you who don't know, our topic for today is how is the VC industry evolving? And we're going to be talking about diversity, globalism, geographic expansion, new models, new stages, new industries, ICOs, and of course, new LPs. And we truly have a global panel sharing their insights today. Now, I know you're all super excited to meet them, so let me quickly go ahead and introduce you to our VIP guests before asking them to properly introduce themselves to you. Welcome to Colorado, USA-based Matthew Bailey, who's a recognized IoT pioneer, advisor, strategist, smart cities expert, and keynote speaker. Welcome to Washington, D.C.-based Dan Mindus, who's a venture capitalist, DC tech titan, and seed investor. Welcome to Israel-based Liora Katzenstein, who's a lawyer, global technology investor, global entrepreneurship education pioneer and advisor. Welcome to California-based Joe Lambert, who's a financial markets expert, keynote speaker, and fund manager. And welcome to London and Iran-based Andreas Schweitzer, who's a global executive educator and advisor. And of course, welcome to my co-host, Christian Meyers. So now I know you want to meet them, so let me go ahead and ask them to properly introduce themselves to you, starting with Matthew. Matthew, please say hi to everyone.
Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Matthew Bailey, and it's an absolute delight to be here. I'm a recognized pioneer of the Internet of Things, having influenced a revolution across the world, focusing on global challenges such as population increase and food security. I'm president of Powering IoT, which operates all over the world, helping governments, Fortune 500 companies, investors in their transformation to thrive in the Internet of Things. I'm also global ambassador for the Open Cloud Consortium, which is a global IoT standards body backed by Intel, Dell, Microsoft, GE, Cisco, Hitachi, ARM, Fujitsu. And this brings the power of the cloud to the edge of an ICT network, which is an imperative innovation for things like the industrial internet and smart cities. I'm also a special advisor to Fortune 500 companies, and in particular to Denver South Economic Development Partnership based here in Colorado. And we recently launched the US's first alliance of cities across an entire state, backed with the private sector, such as the World Trade Center, the Colorado's Technology Association, and Colorado's biggest Fortune 500 company, Arrow Electronics.
Thank you, Matthew. Very excited that you're joining us. Liora, would you like to say hi to everyone?
Yes, hello, everybody. My name is Professor Liora Katzenstein. I'm Israeli and German. I have been involved in the financial world since I came back from teaching at the Harvard Business School in the early 80s. I'm mostly Israel-based, but spending more than half of my time globally. Currently, I am chairperson of the board of Ortus Venture Capital, an innovative, socially oriented venture capital company.
Thank you, Liora. Very excited you're joining us today. Joe, please say hi to everyone.
Yes, this is Joseph Lambert, and it's really a pleasure to be able to join you this morning. Just by way of introduction, I have over 35 years experience I manage the pension fund of one of the largest charities in America. I was founder of what's known as the Best of Uncovered's institutional investor conferences that focus on original independent research on companies with less than $500 million in market cap. That has given me over 100,000 institutional investors that follow me. When I was at Mellon Bank, I raised over $400 million in slightly over a year's period of time for a startup money management division of theirs. And my partners and I have done over 200 private equity transactions and 22 roll-ups.
Welcome, Joe. Very excited you're joining us. Andreas, please say hi to everyone.
Good afternoon, everybody. From London, Andreas Schweitzer. We are London and Tehran based, and since 2009 we are invested in a frontier market. We are invested in Central Asia and particularly in Iran. and we are a M&A and corporate advisory boutique now since 2014, assisting European multinationals to invest. We just started a trade finance fund for frontier markets, again, Central Asia and Iran. There's about 200 million in it. It's from and it's a difficult product these days. And thank you very much for having me on the team this afternoon.
Thank you, Andreas. Very excited you're joining us. And last but definitely not least, Dan, please say hi to everyone.
Hello, this is Dan Mendis from Washington, D.C. I'm one of the partners at NextGen Venture Partners. We've brought together over 850 technologists, entrepreneurs, executives who are part-time with us, who are venture partners, who participate in our efforts to invest in one new seed stage technology company in the United States a month, and then take a service mentality towards helping those companies grow by opening up the connections and expertise of that network to accelerate our portfolio companies. So I'm very glad to be here.
Welcome, Dan. Super excited you're joining us. Now, just a few shout outs before we jump into our questions for our VIPs. On the screen are contact details for our VIPs. Feel free to reach out to them. I know they'd love to hear from you. You can always email us at inspireme@onlinefiresidechat.com. Just a reminder, we have community champions and ever-growing meetups in over 80 cities and 60 countries across the globe, including in North and South America, the UK, Europe, Africa, the Middle East, India, Asia, and Australia. If you'd like to meet up with one of your local chapters or you'd like to start your own, feel free to reach out to us and we'll put you in contact with a community champion. Thank you as always to our volunteer champions from around the globe. You are the heart and soul of our community and we wouldn't be here without you. Our aim is to inspire entrepreneurs in more than 100 countries and we know that together we can make this happen. Thank you again to our VIP guests for joining us today and for sharing your incredible knowledge and wisdom so generously with us. We're extremely excited you're joining us. Thank you to our growing family of supporters and collaborators from around the developing world, once again hosting sessions for hundreds of entrepreneurs who don't have access to necessary bandwidth or understanding of the English language to join our sessions on their own. Thank you to all the presidents, prime ministers, ambassadors, government ministries, UN offices, World Economic Forum, US Embassy Corners, British Council offices, university campuses, schools, business incubators, Chamber of Commerce's, community centers, and radio stations for all your weekly hosting support and for raising awareness within your regions. Of course, thank you to our UN Woman team for all the support you show us. We're streaming across new live platforms today. If you'd like us to broadcast from a radio station in your community, make sure to reach out to us so that we can connect with more entrepreneurs around the world. Now you're here to learn from the best and they are definitely joining us. So to make our VIPs feel super comfortable, this is how it's going to work. We're going to pose a question to one of you. It goes to all of you. We are here to learn from you. So please be 100% honest with your answers. We are brave and we want to be as successful as you. So our topic for today is how is the VC industry evolving? We're going to be looking at diversity, globalism, geographic expansion, new models, new stages, new industries, ICOs, and of course, limited partners. We are going to be starting off with Dan in the hot seat. Dan, we would love to hear your insights. And then, of course, Leora, we'd also love to hear your insights on this question. So starting off really easy, Dan, sit back, relax, and let's learn. Let's set the stage for where things currently stand, Dan. The professional startup and technology investor field includes professional angel investors, venture capitalists that work with companies at different growth stages, corporate investors, governments, NGOs, and more. The investor field has changed, it's expanded. What investor categories are you seeing grow and what types of investors are you seeing come about? We'd love to hear your insights here, Dan. Please go for it.
Sure. Well, I think over the last handful of years, one of the biggest trends has been the entry of non-traditional investors into venture capital, largely driven by how much later companies are going IPO. So you now have sovereign wealth funds, pension plans, extremely high net worth individuals who are investing in companies that are valued at 10, 20, 30, $40 billion prior to going IPO. I think that's a trend that's here to stay as long as entrepreneurs are not terribly excited about going public. The other major trend, one that we're capitalizing on, is leveraging networks in new and interesting ways to benefit investing processes, to benefit portfolio companies. As far as I know, we're the only organization to ask a network of hundreds of people to help out startups to do that at a level of scale. But you are seeing lots of other early stage investors bring together 10, 20, 30, 40 individuals to offer advice, to offer expertise. And I think that trend will continue. The traditional model of a handful of partners getting together in a room, making investment decisions on their own, certainly will persist for a long time, but there are many, many new entrants. And over time, I think you might see a little disruption of the venture capital space.
Great way to start off today's show. Thank you, Dan. Lior, we'd love to hear your insights from Israel. Please go ahead.
Yes, I've been involved in venture capital in Israel since its inception here in the late 1980s. I've been involved with some of the very early funds. What I see as a development, and Dan has mentioned it, is really the entrance of the non-traditional investors, while he has mentioned the upper scale, the sovereign funds, etc. In Israel, we see, thanks to social networks, a lot of investment for the people, if you want. If we have more time later, I can explain how it came out of that social, if you want, unrest in the 2012, the equivalent of Occupy Wall Street or Occupy Paradeplatz in Zurich. So we see social network-based investing in the sense that funds are created with relatively small individual investments of non-professional investors. Ours will be $2,000 US. However, our fund is going to be overseen by the Israeli SEC. And, to Dan's comment about the participation level of the people involved with the funds, each and every of our investments will have to go through all investors for voting.
Thank you, Liora. And moving on, some fascinating insights being shared today. Joe, you've heard Dan touching on a few things, Liora as well. We'd love to hear your thoughts in terms of what's driving this change. Please go ahead.
Well, I think that when we look at funding from the investor, part of it, I think there are some things that people can do in order to get funding, and I think I want to kind of rephrase that a little bit and just say, if people are looking for funding to get funded, they need to find credible people with track record of success in their field, and get them to join the board and make solid business plan with credible financials. And I can't tell you how many times, we see business plans that are incomplete or financials that aren't credible. And I think when it's driving the funding towards venture capital, these are the things that we find most of the investors looking for funding are making the mistake on those areas.
Thank you, Joe and Matthew. I'm sure you've got some insights you want to share here too. Please go ahead.
Sure. So we're starting to see a shift in entrepreneurial education in high schools and in universities. And what that means is that many people who are leaving university want to form their own business. And so venture capital is really, really quite important. But with the rise of things like crowdfunding and equity crowdfunding, what we're starting to see now is, as my panelists have said, is that we're starting to see non-traditional investors starting to participate in stimulating investment for these huge numbers of entrepreneurs that are leaving university.
Thank you, Matthew. And Christian, I know you've been quite quiet. Please share your insights here before we move on to our question for Andreas.
I've just been enjoying listening to the big themes here, and one of them is the diversity and non-traditional nature of new entrants in the venture capital industry. And I know that one of the things you and I are seeing is many corporations, especially in areas such as automotive, are launching venture funds or have venture funds, and traditional industries now see participating in the startup ecosystem early and in an engaged way is a way to remain connected to innovation and place some strategic bets early in companies that might disrupt or help their industries. I know that we're seeing many governments get interested in venture capital as a way to foster economic development, promote job growth, and also for geostrategic reasons. And then as far as geographies go, countries now realize that it's strategic to participate in venture capital. So we have sovereign wealth funds and a greater diversity of geographic participation. And I'd say one of the things overall is that everyone, all types of organizations, and even people at the individual level are seeing that a lot of the future of industry, whether it's transportation and self-driving cars or healthcare, a lot of the innovation is being driven by this new cohort of startups, and they're looking for ways to participate, and that's leading to the flourishing of greater diversity in the venture industry. And it's very exciting.
Thank you,
in addition to that, we're starting to see governments and local cities starting to become more innovative and participate with the entrepreneurial ecosystem to resolve problems that government faces.
Thank you for adding those insights there, Matthew. Most appreciated. So, Andreas, the next question goes to you. Talking about limited partners, LPs for our community, who are the people and organizations that give professional investors capital to invest on their behalf. Andreas, you're working in some interesting spaces. What types of limited partners are you seeing? And how is the world of limited partners changing in terms of the type and, of course, their motivations? Please go ahead, Andreas. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you very much. We still see in our market, which is trade finance and frontier markets, the model of the limited partnership, GP and LP, the classic model we have. We have some companies in Iran where you have lots of investors where they prefer not to join a limited partnership or a fund, so you do a sidecar investment, a co-investment with them. And this, for us, like for the industry, is highly beneficial because you normally get someone from the local environment who is strong in the area, has money to put in, and is willing to take the risk and share the know-how. So we always find intelligent money which provides you insight into the local industry, be it in Kazakhstan, be it in Georgia or in Iran, a very good insurance ticket for one's investment. This is the model we favor. And we still see in our space that the investors like that. Also, the European investors who come in have a liking for a strong local partner as a co-investor.
Thank you, Andreas. Matthew, we'd love to hear your thoughts here too. Please go for it.
Well, I would like to talk about impact investing, if that's possible. The world is moving towards a triple bottom line kind of society, aren't we? Where it's not just about the single bottom line and making money, it's about making money with social impact and environmental impact as well. And we're starting to see a lot more benefit corporations arising and organizations, traditional organizations moving towards benefit corporations in the triple bottom line society. And that is all about impact. And impact investing is something that I would encourage our audience to research or look into. But basically, we're looking at about $40 to $60 trillion being available over the next 20 to 30 years for investing in impact-focused businesses. That's a triple bottom line. And I find that very, very interesting.
Thank you, Matthew. Joe, your thoughts in terms of the changing nature of LPs and what's driving their motivations? Please go ahead.
Well, I think that, the question can really be focused on the investor and the company who is needing the funds. And I find that there is a bit of a disconnect between what the investor believes is a valuation that's important for them and what the company believes is a valuation, and trying to get those two to meet, whether it's the form of a limited partnership. I primarily focus on, bringing companies to the public market. So we might take a later stage company that's already pre-IPO and then bring them into the market. But one of the things to cut a deal is how are you going to get these two factions to get an agreement on valuation, one to the investor who wants to get money into the corporation who believes that their company is more valuable than maybe it is. And so I think that that's the challenge when you look at the structure, whether it's a, as I mentioned, LP, we're focused more on trying to get that investor and the company together on some kind of valuation matrix that makes sense for both of them.
Thank you, Joe. And Christian, any thoughts you'd like to add in terms of what our VIPs have been saying today?
Certainly. I think everyone's touched on a lot of what's happening in the limited partner area of the venture ecosystem. And since we have a general audience, I just would like to recap that limited partners are the people and organizations that give venture capitalists money to invest on their behalf. And limited partners are looking for yield. In other words, they're looking for a greater return than they could achieve with something like bonds. They're also looking for more diversification by participating in venture capital. They're also, a lot of them are looking for an option to invest more money in the future. So they're behaving in an exploratory fashion with how they're investing, either in venture or new venture funds. And then, as Matthew said, there are a lot of limited partners out there looking to use their money to solve global challenges. And that's becoming an increasing part of how they behave in choosing to give money to venture capitalists and in the mandates they ask for from venture capitalists. So it's a very interesting time.
Thank you, Christian. Moving on to our next question, which we're going to be posing to Leora. Leora, you've seen some very interesting stuff over the course of your career. And of course, we'd love for you to touch on the charters in terms of professional investors and how they invest. What traditional and new charters are you seeing out there? Please go ahead.
Okay. As I mentioned, I have been involved in this ecosystem in Israel and slightly worldwide. I've been in boards of Israeli-based companies in the US, in Germany, and other countries as well. Whereas at the beginning, the charter was, if you want me to take it very far, greed is good, make as much money as you want, Gecko of the 90s. Gordon Gecko of the 90s. Now the creed is very different. Now the creed, as was mentioned before, is the benefit of society. I am, among other things, an educator. I have created a very unique international college for entrepreneurship education, and I can see the change not only in the investor community, but mostly in my students. It's a grassroots movement that the young generation would like to find solution to ecological problems, to famine problems around the world. In this area of the world, a lot of water issues, etc.
Very inspiring words there, Leora. Dan, we'd love to hear your thoughts in terms of traditional and new charters you're seeing out there. Please go ahead.
I agree with Leora that the change is being driven by younger people and by the entrepreneurs themselves. I think that many limited partners are still looking for a return on their cash. But what venture capitalists are realizing is that the best entrepreneurs want something more than just a check. They want a venture capitalist that will be a cheerleader, that believes in their mission, that can bring resources to the table beyond just cash, that is going to give the entrepreneur some greater levels of control than many venture capitalist firms have done in the past. I think that there's more venture capital, which is a good thing. So entrepreneurs have more choices about who their financing partners are going to be, and venture firms therefore have to differentiate in new ways. That's leading to new kinds of charters, new kinds of philosophies, and new mission statements. It used to be a venture capitalist was just, if they had a website at all, it was, hey, we have money, we can invest in you, but don't call us too often. That's changing. The power dynamic is changing, where entrepreneurs are in the driver's seat more and more. Venture capitalists are are service providers with cash, but that's leading to an explosion of new ideas, new models, and I think it's a really exciting time.
Thank you, Dan. Joe, we'd love to hear your insights on this question. Please go ahead.
Excuse me, I had it on mute for a second. The big question, and I come from the side of maybe the venture capitalist who is looking to invest. I think that when we're looking to invest in companies, we actually do want a bottom line return from that. I think that is really a very key aspect. Social benefits can derive from that. We certainly will take that into consideration. But as investors and the people that we're responsible that are in our fund, they're looking at return, and I would agree with what was just said on that as well about looking for return, but also being socially responsible if that element can be taken into consideration as well.
Thank you, Joe. Moving on to our next question, and we're going to be posing it to Dan. Andreas, we'd also love to hear your insights here, and then we'd love for Christian just to give us a summary for our entrepreneurs. Dan, we'd love to hear from you, your fund's investment mandate, anything you can share in terms of this. Please go ahead.
Sure. So it's seed stage technology companies across the United States. But again, because of our model of bringing together hundreds of entrepreneurs and executives to participate in the process and to help our portfolio companies, we're looking for startups that can take advantage of that network in significant ways. And in particular, we're able to line up at scale warm customer introductions through the connections, the second degree LinkedIn connections of our venture partners. And so that leads to a lot of B2B SaaS companies, but it's across industries and across verticals where startups are just looking to get in touch with customers, drive top line revenue, and where an extended network can be particularly valuable to them. But we've invested in healthcare, we've invested in education, we've invested in deep technology. From a global perspective, probably the company that's made the most noise is was up until a week ago called Hyperloop One. Now with Richard Branson's investment called Virgin Hyperloop One, but a wide range where an extended network can be enormously valuable.
Thank you so much, Andreas. We'd love to hear your thoughts in terms of your fund's investment mandate. Please go ahead.
Thank you. We have two segments. The one is a listed fund across the Central Asia and the Iranian stock markets, where out of that we see a lot of opportunities for unlisted opportunities or spin-off, and we have a second vehicle where we promote those and invest ourselves in these startups. And if you take Iran, for example, you have two companies which are similar to provide the same service to Uber. You have a company, a local version of Airbnb. You have a local version of Amazon. So we find a Silicon Valley, also often by Iranians who came back, where investments are phenomenal, but also valuations, as was mentioned before, are sometimes a little bit just beyond anything reasonable. Our second mandate to invest is a trade finance, and this has to do that banks under Basel III have difficulties to finance export. So what we have done, we have structured a Liechtenstein product, EU-regulated product, which buys invoices from the European or the OECD sellers towards frontier markets. Our investors have normally a government risk because these funds, these invoices are covered by a national export credit insurance. And in today's of literally no interest in Europe, this is a very attractive product and very short term, and it replaces what banks are not doing. Sovereign funds, insurance companies are our main target for that.
Thank you, Andreas.
And a big need for Africa, Central Asia, and Middle East is trade finance facilities.
Thank you, Andreas.
And a lot of hedge funds are coming into this. It's a little bit a new category, an asset allocation also for hedge funds.
Thank you, Andreas. Christian, we'd love to hear your insights in terms of what Dan and Andreas were saying.
one of the things I've noticed in the thread in the past few conversations is the discussion of entrepreneurs and where they're coming from, and how we're seeing a cultural change where entrepreneurship is now not only encouraged, it's often one of the things that's most highly encouraged among young people in terms of career choices. And entrepreneurs are increasingly looking for mission, so social mission, and having an impact, whether they're working in healthcare or finance. That's part of the type of company they're creating. But at the same time, as Joseph said, limited partners and are looking for fund managers that are still going to be good stewards of capital in terms of creating return. And then, as both Joseph and Andrea said, some of that comes down to the valuations they negotiate with the startups they invest in. So a changing dynamic between entrepreneurs and investors, but a more active dynamic, which I think is healthy for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Moving on to our next question, we'd love to hear from Joe and then Dan and Leora, of course. Joe, what are some of the parameters of the investment deals you and your peers are looking for, and are they changing? Please go ahead.
Well, I think that the investment parameters, I think what we're looking for is we're looking for companies with solid business plans, and that they have top line revenue increasing quarter on quarter. And most importantly, it comes down to the credibility of the people of the team. And when you evaluate something, you can look at numbers, you can look at everything, but it really comes down to that management team where you kind of have to kick the tires, so to speak, of, can you actually get that subjective impression to understand if a management team really is a quality team and they know what they're doing. And that really only comes by, like I said, on-site visits with them, discussions with them, but certainly the solid business plan, top line revenue increasing quarter by quarter, but most importantly, the management teams.
Thank you, Joe. Dan, we'd love to hear from you in terms of what you and your peers look for when it comes to the parameters of investment deals. Please go ahead.
Well, I think Joe hit the nail on the head. And to the second question of is it changing? From my perspective, the answer is no. It's always been team. It's always been can this group of individuals who's come together around a mission, around building a great business, can they execute? Can they do it together? Do you see evidence of that over time? At Next Gen Venture Partners, again, we're fortunate to have this large network of people who can serve as personal references and who often have history with entrepreneurs before we invest. But while there's so many other things that are important, from the technology to the market to the intellectual property, it all comes back to team. The best team with a bad idea can create an enormous company over time. The opposite probably isn't true. And I think that will probably be the case. Team as the most important factor, especially at the seed stage, that will endure over the long term.
Thank you, Dan. Leora,
can I say
amen?
Can I say amen to that?
Awesome, awesome. Leora, please go for it.
Well, I will just join Joe and Dan. I've been active in this space for the last 30 years, and I'm very happy to see that now everybody agrees. When I started about 30 years ago, people were still debating if it's the product or the market. Especially in places like Israel, where we were far away from the market, which was perceived then as being US only. Now it's obviously the whole world with a high focus on Asia. But nowadays, I think that everybody would agree team is A, and it was said bad team, good idea is always much better than the opposite. So I do not have much to add on this, only to say that in our little college, we do practical assignments instead of exams, and they have to self-assign themselves into teams. And the only requirement is that the parameters of language, in our case, English, technology savvy, financial savvy, marketing savvy, etc., will be covered at least by one team member. So they get an early experience in that.
Thank you, Leora. Absolutely brilliant insights being shared today. Moving on to our next question, Matthew, we'd love to hear your thoughts here, and then Andreas, and we'd love for Christian to sum up for our community. Matthew, we've been talking about changes in the venture capital industry from a geographic perspective. We've always seen in Silicon Valley that they invest within a car ride, and now we're seeing firms from around the world expanding their range, engaging geographic arbitrage. I know you've got some thoughts in terms of this. I know you've got some other thoughts you'd like to share with our community on this topic. Would you like to start us out? Please go for it.
It's a big question. I think that Israel is very interesting, isn't it? They've done a lot of spread betting in order to become a phenomenal technology innovation cluster, and what a success Israel has been. With Silicon Valley, I'm not so convinced it's at the leading edge of venture capital anymore, because we've got this triple bottom line. And for me, I think the panelists made some great points around some of the hygiene factors for matching VCs with businesses. But actually, it's all about the culture. The alignment of culture of the venture capitalists and the alignment of culture in the business. And that's something that I think is fundamental. There has to be a cultural alignment between the businesses and the venture capitalists. And that, to me, is the fundamental thing that I advise all the businesses around the world when we seek investment together. I think we're going to see a lot more female leadership in the venture capital market. And I think that's going to change the culture at the board level. And I think that's a good thing. Because we are moving towards a triple bottom line society, I think that there's going to be an enabler from the female leadership to help us to understand how do we effectively make money, but also serve this social impact and this environmental impact that is imperative for our global society.
Thank you, Matthew. Andreas, I'm sure you've also got some insights you want to share here. Please go ahead.
Yes, to follow on what Matthew just said, I would even go so far to say that today a national fund, a sovereign fund, or any other large pension fund is not even in a position to invest in companies who would not follow a triple bottom line approach. And it goes so far, there's a particular fund who makes its investment decision on the water efficiency of the companies that they invest in. And today, these companies call the fund to get advice to make them more efficient, because they know very well they will get money from them, or otherwise they won't. So I don't believe we need much more pressure on the triple bottom line. It will be a natural, and it's a matter of society that people will have a reasonable way of thinking to invest. And the female leadership, I hope we get away from this quota system where we have in many countries yet in board levels. I'm not a great believer in quota. However, I'm a great believer that a lot of women join businesses, and hopefully this comes sooner than later. Again, sorry to talk about always my same country, but if we look at Iran, there are a lot of female leaders in the business. And for me, in this case, Iran is quite an interesting example how entrepreneurship can be fostered by women and with women.
Thank you, Andreas. And Christian, we'd love for you to sum up for our community all these brilliant insights being shared today. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Alysia. Your original question was about investors venturing out of their local regions, and I can say that for Silicon Valley, one of the reasons that's happening is there's more competition because there are a range of new investors here looking for opportunities. Everyone is recognizing that entrepreneurship is a global phenomenon. People are looking to capitalize on that. The new entrants have to go there to compete, and then there are advantages that come with looking globally. Some of them are the price of a deal may be better if you're investing outside of Silicon Valley. And then it may further some of these other objectives that we're talking about, helping the world through wise investments that also produce returns. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Moving on to our next question, Leora, we'd definitely love to hear from you in terms of this, because I know you have a global perspective, and then of course from Andreas and from Dan. Leora, one of the things we're all noticing is that governments are getting more and more involved in building startup ecosystems and in the business of venture capital. What are you noticing? What are the implications? What are some of the challenges you expect them to face? And where do you think this is heading? Please go ahead, Leora.
Okay, in Israel, it's actually the government that has built the venture capital ecosystem or industry. And maybe one of the reasons is that till the early 90s, when the government intervened, we're more or less a socialist country, to which I refuse to go back. I went back when all these things started to more or less loosen up. But the government did several smart things. They say we create an ecosystem by which we give money to funds, 20 by number at that time. It was $100 million by the government. That 1993 was a lot of money by anyone's standard. And the government would give $8 million to any fund that would bring an internationally recognized partner. In our case, mostly American, but later more and more European, Taiwanese. Nowadays, apropos, the whole industry is dominated by the Chinese, and the country is bought off by the Chinese. But that's the case in Israel. The second important point was that the government said they are an enabler, which means they are not there to stay. And within a period of 10 years, they have let the funds, those who have done well enough, and those were most of them, to buy them out at a predetermined price with a very slight premium. One slight point I'd like to add about women in venture capital. In our fund authors, actually the women, we have a board of 9 highly achieved personalities. 5 out of the 9 are female, and I'm the chairperson of the board, as was mentioned before.
Thank you, Leora, and we'd love to hear from some of our other panelists in terms of this question. Andreas, I know this is something you're very passionate about as well. We're noticing more and more governments getting involved in the investing space, building ecosystems, playing in the venture capital space. I know we are running out of time, but Andreas, we'd love to hear from you. Please go ahead.
Yes, sovereign funds have the mission to produce something that is good for their country, be it a foreign and be it invest. We know a case of one of the Central Asia foreign funds. They invested in a European company who makes vaccines because that's what they need in their country. So by doing good at home, you can do good with a different in a different country because you find the best technology there. It brings me back to one of the issues. Today, once we looked at the technology, we would immediately look at the people who run it. And if we are not really comfortable that this is a great team, we would walk away regardless. Obviously, if this happens to the next Google or the next Uber, then you bite your fingernails. But we had to put this in because we see that we fail when you bet on a team that cannot perform. Governments, to me, are a great partner if you are a great partner to them. Sovereign funds have a hard time to identify their investments themselves, or they must rely on others because there's only so much they can do. So go to the sovereign funds. Normally they give you money if you come with a good proposal, but there must be a national angle they can sell internally.
Thank you, Andreas and Dan. Of course, we'd love to hear from you. Please go ahead.
In the United States, we're a country that's rich in venture capital. And so the federal government has some programs to inject money into the industry, but they're relatively modest. I think there are other areas where government is far more involved and where there's some opportunities for improvement, frankly. So two of the largest companies to come out of the sort of US venture funded world are Airbnb and Uber that have spread around the world. Their models have been copied. And there's been a fair amount of resistance at the government level, in my mind, really protecting the status quo operators and not being as open to innovation as perhaps they should be. I'd say that the same is true at the Food and Drug Administration in the United States, where innovation in pharmaceuticals and medical devices often doesn't move as quickly as perhaps it could, partially because of entrenched interests. And I think that's played out in a number of other areas, including the funding of academic research and scientific research. That's a massive area where the United States government is involved. It's something that obviously venture capitalists are interested in because they're in the business of commercializing technology breakthroughs. But there's often a mismatch between the academics and the researchers and the entrepreneurs and venture capitalists who want to finance them. That process from academic research to startup doesn't work as smoothly as it could. And so I think there are a lot of opportunities for government to improve, at least in the United States, that have nothing to do with direct financing of venture capital, which is perfectly well financed from the private sector, in my view.
Thank you, Dan. Absolutely brilliant insights being shared today. And let's move on to something very hot in the news right now. And we're going to pose this question to Matthew. And then, of course, we'd love to just hear quickly from Dan, Leora, and then Christian to sum up for our community. Let's talk about ethical considerations. And Matthew, we'd love to hear from you in terms of what ethical considerations affect your work. Please go for it.
Okay, well, my personal focus is on triple bottom line and triple bottom line only. And those are the organizations and governments I work with around the world. So that's my personal focus, is because I think we just simply cannot ignore the global challenges we face with 3 billion people that will be living in and around, additional 3 billion people living in and around cities by 2050. And we need to increase our food output by 70% by 2050 to feed the anticipated population growth. So what drives my personal businesses and drives what I do around the world with governments and organizations and tech giants is about focusing on those two main challenges. And that's it.
Thank you, Matthew. Dan, let's talk your ethical considerations and how they affect your work. Please go for it.
One of the unfortunate things that we've seen come into the news recently, but it's always been there, is sexual harassment and gender discrimination in the technology and venture capital industry. There are a handful of venture firms that have had significant disruption at their partnership level because of things that individuals did that were deeply damaging. Where they abused their power and the power of the checkbook. And this is, of course, a phenomenon not confined to venture capital and technology, but where I think it's incumbent on everyone to do what they can to stamp this out. And I think that entrepreneurs and limited partners are stepping up, are speaking out, are making sure that venture capitalists are not doing it to the degree that they can. But I think that's something that needs to continue. And I think that while we do see a rise in female entrepreneurs and female venture capitalists, it's not nearly enough, not nearly enough. And so one of the things that I've been working on and thinking about is how to encourage more women to come in and how to identify and, frankly, run out of the industry anyone who does engage in these horrible practices.
Love it, love it, love it. Thank you, Dan. Leora, we'd love to hear your thoughts in terms of this question, and then Christian to sum up for our community. Please go for it, Leora.
Yeah, two quick points. One, we know that access to large sums of money always induced people maybe to behave not at the best ethical standard. We have seen the scandals in the Western financial world, followed by the crash of 2008. Frankly, I have been following financial markets in the West. I have not seen a lot of change. I can only say that in my experience over the last 30 years, venture capital companies have a bit of a better standing in this respect, not because they are made of a better moral fiber, but because, as I tell my students, the world of entrepreneurship is so intense and chaotic and rapid that you cannot bother to remember lies you told some days ago. So ethics for me is a built-in element in entrepreneurship. And when we taught this at the Harvard Business School 30 years ago already, at least I used to say, good ethics make good business, and ethics came at that sentence before business, and that at least personally was the way I have been behaving in the last 30 years, and I've paid some personal price for that, obviously.
Thank you, Leora. And Christian, just to quickly sum up on these really interesting points for our community, please go ahead.
Well, I agree with what Leora said, which is good ethics make good business. And for much of the history of technology, ethics has been talked about, but it hasn't been an active part of the conversation in company development and investing. And we're moving into a phase where conversations of ethics are going to be front and foremost in terms of how investors, entrepreneurs, companies, and individuals who are all collaborating together manage themselves. And anything strong can tolerate scrutiny. So the ethical scrutiny that I think is going to be a defining feature of 2018 when it comes to venture investing is simply going to yield more opportunity. But I think to sum it up, these ethical conversations have a long way to go, but they will produce a stronger industry.
Thank you, Christian. Very, very, very fascinating insights being shared today. Now, our favorite part of today's session, we are going to go around our panel. We're going to ask each of our VIPs to keep their answers super short and tell us the first thing that pops into your mind. Our community loves this, so please be 100% honest. We're going to ask you what excites you in 2017, and in your opinion, what industries are ripe for disruption? Starting with Joe. Joe, please go for it. What excites you in 2017, and what industries are ripe for disruption?
Oh, that's and I get the first question out of the box on that. But actually, I actually in really thinking that the cannabis industry certainly is becoming quite explosive, and we're finding that that Canada seems to be the most open market, to bringing companies in the cannabis sector. In that area. And then the next one that I think is the Bitcoin and the whole area of that. Those are the two areas I think that are going to be explosive in growth.
Thank you, Joe. Leora, what excites you in 2017 and what industries are ripe for disruption?
Two quick insights. What excites me is I'll take the Bitcoin, but I will connect it to ethics. The new revolution, Bitcoin, blockchain, all these things that will make basically the whole global financial system totally clear, and will with time eliminate the use of hard currency in favor of digital currency, thereby making crime, terror, the whole transparency issue that will make many ethical and criminal phenomena hopefully obsolete very quickly. The industry that I see ready for disruption is an industry I have a close relation with, and I said it 20 years ago already when I left the US. It's the education industry. With the internet and so on and pollution, there's no sense for at least graduate students to go into their cars, pollute the air, drive, may have accidents, waste time, and so on. just in order to listen to a lecturer that in many cases knows less than they do about the subject to be discussed.
Thank you, Leora. Dan, as quickly as possible, what excites you in 2017? What industries are ripe for disruption? Please go for it.
Making healthcare more customer, consumer, patient friendly. NextGen Venture Partners has a number of investments in the space, and we think it's going to take off over time.
Awesome. Andreas, what excites you in 2017? What industries are ripe for disruption?
What excites me last year and next year, these are frontier markets. And I would say disruptive is through blockchain, again, the administration of trade finance and other, the whole contractual work has not seen, the legal business hasn't seen much yet of blockchain and digitalization. So there will be quite a move in that area.
Thank you, Andreas. Matthew, what about you? Please share your insights.
What really excites me is the recapturing of citizens of their own data and owning their own data and leveraging that as a new trading platform as a service and for financial return. Data ownership for the citizen.
Thank you, Matthew. Christian, what excites you in 2017? What industries are ripe for disruption? As quickly as you can.
I'm very excited about increased access to the financial system through technologies such as blockchain and automation in areas such as venture capital.
Thank you, Christian. Now we're going to ask our VIPs to prepare their tweet piece of advice so that we can go out and become as successful as they are. In the meantime, thank you to everyone for this truly amazing session. And thank you again to our VIPs for joining us today. We absolutely loved hosting you. Just to keep you posted on our upcoming sessions with some of the world's best joining us again. This coming Wednesday, October 18th, is an important follow-up session on AI. It's Rise of the Robots. What's the new frontier hold for all of us? Definitely one not to miss. Then on October 25th, health tech and health innovation, new technologies, shifting boundaries, and changing the face of world health. Remember, if you'd like to keep us up to date on all your exciting news, we love hearing from you. You can email us at inspireme@onlinefiresidechat.com. You can find me as well as all our VIPs and our champions on LinkedIn. Don't forget, if you enjoyed today's session, you feel there are entrepreneurs from around the world that can benefit, make sure to share the invitation so we can reach our 100-country goal. Now, let's quickly run through our panel and ask our VIPs to please share their tweet piece of advice. Starting with Matthew. Matthew, please share your tweet piece of advice.
Sorry, my advice is very simple. Follow your passions.
You said what I just wanted to say.
Leora, what's your tweet piece of advice?
Well, follow your passion. I'll have to think about something else.
Thank you, Leora.
I really believe that that's it.
Thank you, Joe. How about you? What's your tweet piece of advice?
Oh, I would say make money, but keep your ethics pure.
Love it, love it, love it. Andreas, what's your tweet piece of advice?
Lifelong learning. Just because we're getting older doesn't mean we shouldn't go back to the university from time to time and update us. I love doing that.
That's what makes them the best in the world. Dan, what's your tweet piece of advice?
Work with the best people you can find.
Thank you. And Christian, what's your tweet piece of advice?
Have more conversations with people who are different than you.
Thank you, Christian, and thank you to everybody. We have had some extraordinary VIPs joining us. Thank you again to everyone. My tweet piece of advice is be grateful for everything you have. It's a privilege to be entrepreneurs. It's a privilege to learn from such extraordinary business leaders. We should never take this privilege for granted. We're living through some very challenging but exciting times, and we are privileged to be able to do what we do and build our dreams. Thanks again to everyone for a truly, truly amazing session and for joining us. We look forward to seeing you on Wednesday. As these VIPs will tell you, to remember to keep hustling and to never, ever, ever give up. On the count of 3, I'm going to ask our VIPs to shout bye. 1, 2, 3. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
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 Thanks, guys. Bye. Bye.